Hello and welcome to All You Leaders in Strategy. I'm Mike Harris and welcome back to episode 10. That's right, double digits. Who'd have thought? Certainly not some of you based on some of the feedback I've had. But anyway, I'm joined here today with a very special guest, business development legend and my good friend, Tom Holbrow. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you, Mike. It's great to be here. Really looking forward to doing this. Really appreciate the invite.
No, it's great. Great to have you. We've obviously had a few attempts to try to get this going. Holidays and other things got in the way, but we're finally here, which is really good. So today we're going to be discussing what is business development, which should be an interesting subject.
Hope so.
But before we get into that, just want to welcome everybody back. And for those who are joining us for the first time, I think this is an excellent jumping on spot. And I thought, Tom, I'd give you an opportunity to do a bit of a podcast pitch, which is kind of like an elevator pitch, but even better because you've got more people that you can actually present it to.
Okay, thank you, Mike. So my name is Tom Holbrow. I'm a business development director and I work in the construction and property industry. I've been in that industry for probably just over 35 years now. I know it doesn't show. I work with Mace Group. They're a global program and project delivery consultant and construction experts, and we deliver some pretty substantial schemes and notable projects around the world. I tend to work primarily in kind of the London and Southeast area at the moment, but I've previously worked all over the world and all over the UK and Ireland.
So let's talk business development. Mm-hmm. So let's just get to the heart with the very first question. What is business development?
Crikey. Yeah, what a question. And quite situational, I think, because it's many different things at various times in the evolution of a business, or as you head throughout the year. At a very high level, I mean, actually, let me go back really to kind of how I started in business development and how the role evolved, not only within my own career, but I think within the industry and perhaps within the wider definition. So I actually started out in the industry in an operational role. I had when I had a proper job, I was an electrical engineer a long time ago, and through that kind of started running projects. Had electricians and site teams working for me, delivering some notable schemes, and then ended up working in an organisation that was very sales focused. So on the operational side, but there was a sales focus to the team, and there were these ladies and men coming in who were very smartly dressed, had the gift of the gab, very confident, and were going out. And these were the salespeople. And as a young man in my 20s, you kind of, and they were doing okay. So as a young man in my 20s, I'm kind of thinking, I want some of that. I want to do that. I was very attracted to that, and almost kind of taking that very formal knowledge that I'd gained in terms of delivery and taking that into what at times could be quite an informal scenario. So persuaded the sales manager, who's one of the leaders that I still respect now, to give me a chance, and he could see that eagerness and that enthusiasm, which hopefully I've still got even 35 years later. So he gave me a go, and I was good at it, and thoroughly enjoyed it. Then my wife came to me, so I'm kind of mid-20s, and said two words that changes my life forever, which is I'm pregnant. She's made other two-word statements many times since then, but that one, I'm pregnant. So I thought, right, well, I need to get a proper job, and went back into that operational side in terms of delivery, a bit more consistent earnings and prospects and the like. What I found is that kind of sales, what if, optioneering, doing the deal approach never left me. And what I found is I was retaining my clients, delivering well for them, and negotiating the next scheme. And truth be told, I was kind of better at that than I was in terms of the delivery. You don't need to nod at this point, Mike. So I had another boss at the time who said, actually, you're really good at that part of the business. We've never had that before. So got me to do more and more of that, and ended up giving me the title of business development manager. And it wasn't that widespread, certainly within the industry, maybe within commerce generally at that time, probably kind of mid to late 90s, kind of that time. So started doing that role, but realised that there was a lack of process and approach and business nous around business development. It wasn't a tried and trusted career path, not like an accountant or health and safety or project delivery or quantity surveyor or the like. So that was foreign to me. I didn't recognise that you didn't follow a process that was consistent to try and get a result. That pure, almost maverick approach, of which there was plenty around me in that kind of sales or business development environment, just didn't sit comfortably with me. That's not how I understood business was done. So I started applying those principles into this side of the business, and took the title literally, business development, so development of the business. And what I found is it worked. It landed very, very well. So continue to evolve that, continue to take that business-led approach to a sales environment. And in my industry, it's very relationship-based, or it certainly was more so back then, almost only relationship-based. And try and put some consistency in approach, plans, strategies, and outcomes around that. And evolve that over many, many years, to the point where I believe now, I firmly believe, passionately believe, that business development is a role in the same way as a project manager, quantity surveyor, accountant, etc. You don't necessarily get a degree in it. But I can point to many, many times, some of them even working with you, Mike, throughout my career, where I've fallen on those base principles to bring value to a business. Now, if that's not happening, then you're not doing the job right.
So what would those principles be then?
Oh, crikey, mate. So really, it starts with the strategy, the plan. So there's no point in going out and developing business, i.e. business development, if you're going off on a tangent to what the actual business defines itself as, and as what it wants to be, and what its anticipated or desired outcome is. So my principles start with that, really. Now, what I found many times in organisations is actually that doesn't exist either. So you have to almost take a step or two backwards to be able to develop that overriding strategy, which I know you talk a lot about, and why I find your podcasts immensely interesting.
Thank you. I'll give you the tenner later.
So starting with that strategy, and then starting to hang off all the elements from that, in terms of if that's our strategy, what is it we want to get from that? What are the key objectives that we're trying to achieve from that? What are we currently experiencing? What is the current situation around us? So it's all very well having those objectives, but if we're over here, you need a blooming good strategy to get you from there to there, which is okay. That's absolutely fine. But it needs to be smart, specific, measurable, so on and so forth. And the key part of that being achievable. So the objectives, setting up that strategy, and then really where I think business development starts to come in, and I have worked in organisations where almost production of the strategy is job done, and of course it's not. It's the implementation of that strategy, the tactics around the delivery of that strategy, and then how we control that, how we measure it, how we monitor it, to ensure that we're getting success, that it is working or not, in which case you kind of loop round again and change it again. And I think probably those last three elements, tactics, implementation, and control, are the areas where I feel business development done correctly has a real impact in a business. It gets involved in the prior stages, but it's not only the creation of that strategy, but the implementation of it. and it's those principles.
So, in your view, is business development the same as sales and marketing, or is there a marked difference?
No, I don't believe it is. And there's a case, sales and marketing get banded together quite closely, and actually they're two very separate things. And I've got a diploma in marketing. I've studied it, and you'll have had a sense of some of that in an earlier point. I think it is distinctly different, which is why it's called different, why it's called business development, because it is development of the business. Partly because I think sales and marketing to some degree can be done on its own. Business development can't. It needs to pull in all other aspects of the business. There's as much internal sales as there is external sales in business development. Business development, I think, comprises of sales and marketing, but a whole host of other things as well. I've had teams where I've had business development managers working for me who don't understand why they're doing what they're doing. They don't have an overview of the numbers in the business, and the numbers are very important. And it's well, how can you get out of bed in the morning and go to work if you don't actually know what that purpose is? And of course, there's elements of that within sales and marketing, but I see business development as a much more broader role than that. It comprises that. And thankfully, in organisations, small and large, I've had expert support on the marketing and on the sales side. But it's probably been myself and my team, the business development team, who've been in there kind of coordinating all of that, the glue that kind of holds it all together. So I do see it as distinctly different.
Yeah.
So, I mean, those are some of my thoughts around what business development comprises of, Mike. Now, I have worked with you for you. So you're used to how I work, but you've worked with other organisations as well, and you're now advising organisations. What are your thoughts?
Well, I suppose for me, business development is that front end of the business that so it's as you said earlier, it is sales and marketing, but it's more than that, and it's. I guess it's what it says on the tin. It's that development of the business. So understanding what the business wants to do and then looking at the plan of action to deliver that. And I think it gets confused with sales and marketing, hence why I asked the question earlier about, do you think it's the same thing? Because the whole premise of business development for me is, it's almost like, I guess, the herald that goes ahead of the troops, that is out there finding out what's going on, mapping the landscape and the territory in front of them, and then bringing that data information back to the business to decide where they go next. So they've kind of got the roadmap of where they want to go, but they've got to check that the territory that they're going into is exactly right. So the role of the BD, as I say, is to go ahead of the business and understand what they're coming into to see how that fits back to the roadmap they've got in front of them. So that's why I think it's different to sales and marketing, because I think sales and marketing is very much reacting to circumstances, whereas I think business development is going out, understanding it, and then influencing what's actually ahead of them. So
I really like that. I mean, the herald at the front of the business, sometimes the knight in shining armour, quite often the Joker.
Do you have any stories or case studies that you'd like to share with our audience that you feel that would be useful to them?
Yeah, this pops up occasionally in meetings, that kind of question, and I have to think long and hard, because the job every day is about doing something different and making an impact. And there's been numerous, generally where I've felt most enthused and satisfied is where you've changed the course of activity, the course of action, and that's because the strategy has demanded that. If you do what you always did, you'll get what you always got. Has demanded that. Or circumstances have forced you to change. You don't always win the work you want to. Yeah, global events, and there's a lot of that. I had a sales team, business development team, and somebody came to me, and it was, it's so hard, and this has happened, that's happened, and I'm like, okay, think back 3 years, what was happening in the world then? Think back 3 years prior to that, what was happening in the world then? There's always something. You've got to succeed despite the challenges, not fail because of them. So what do you think the job is? We've got to overcome those challenges. So business development is very much about that because it's difficult. So changing that course of action, whether it's getting into new markets, whether it's new products, new relationships. So I see business development very much as kind of identifying the gaps and then finding a way to close those gaps out. Now, of course, as soon as you do that, there's another gap somewhere else.
Give us an example. Pause.
Okay, give you an example.
Yeah.
Okay, so crikey, we worked in an organisation where we were given a new stream of work. It was an internal business that manufactured modular solutions, and we needed to make that business stand on its own feet, not just work internally. So we had to get out there in the marketplace and form a strategy around how we were going to take that primarily internal business and grow it externally. And it was tough. It was hard work. I seem to think at the time we were either in recession or just coming out of recession as well. In recession, so really tricky. And we did it. That kind of almost art of the possible or almost art of the impossible, is kind of what I run towards. Probably to my own detriment sometimes, but kind of, again, you don't need to agree with that. But and we did it. And how did we do it? So it was really coming back to basics, forming that strategy, understanding, is there a place for this product? Yes. What is the competitive advantage that we want to promote here? Where is the value in the eye? Where's the beauty in the eye of the beholder? And then what is the plan once we've agreed all of that to get that out to market and identify opportunity? And that's, in that instance, armed with the knowledge of what we're trying to do, and then take that out to market and grow our existing markets with a new product, and then the really hard thing, which is a new market and a new product, but doing that. And it worked. It worked up to a point, and then other corporate decisions were made, and it's been the same numerous numerous times.
So a bit different to you, I guess, that I keep going back to the same case studies when I do the workshops that I do. I utilise the same examples all the time. And one of the ones I use a lot is actually when you and I first worked together. And I tell the story about how I inherited a business from the guy who went on to be my boss. And within a space of 6 months, we'd gone from 6 clients down to 1 because the client base disappeared, because 2 got acquired, couple of mergers, somebody else pulled out of the market we're in. So those long-term clients that the business had disappeared. So that was the first challenge we had. And then the second challenge was we thought we had a reasonably full order book. And then the government found that they'd actually spent the money twice in a particular area. So they halved the jobs that they had. And unfortunately, the majority of our jobs were the ones that got cut away. So we were left there with a business that was supposed to be 60 million. We had something like 15 million pounds worth of work for the following year. Didn't want to reward success that we'd had previously through redundancy. So you and I were sat there sort of scratching out, and you just joined me. So God knows what you were thinking coming into the business, thinking, well, hang on a minute, I thought I was joining something that was a success.
Not at all. That's what I was there for.
Yeah.
And it was great to have that opportunity to test that.
And that's really when, for me, we went through a trial and error, if you remember. We looked at what worked, what didn't work, repeated it. And some of these lessons were really obvious. Like, if you're working on a bid, have a bid manager. But also pick the right person for the bid manager. Don't just pick the person who happens to be available. And so we went through that process of backwards and forwards. If it's worked, let's repeat it. If it didn't work, why didn't it work? And we did that analysis. And I think very quickly, actually, we turned things around. And And what worked for me was I'm not a natural business development person in the way that you are, and I think the way we worked together was really good in that we complemented each other, with you being able to use the skills that you had around going out, understanding the market, taking the feedback into the business, and I was able to then sort of take that into the business and look at how we actually restructured and developed internally with the business to match what the feedback was that was coming back.
Can I give you a case study where perhaps it hasn't worked
Yes,
as well? So I won't name names, but I found myself in a situation, I don't know, 15 years ago. So I think that puts you outside of our
just
time.
before we met.
Just before we met, absolutely. And the strategy was wrong. The strategy hadn't worked, and I hadn't been in the business that long. And part of my role was as business development to implement that strategy that had already been formed, and it hadn't worked. And that particular business unit had failed, and unfortunately had to be closed down. So I found myself in the office, and I was next door to the room where the operatives were being led in one by one and being made redundant. Their time at that business had come to an end, and the walls were paper thin in the office. And I heard every meeting, and I wasn't there I was there to do something else, but I just found myself in this office next door. So I went through, not absolutely not to the same degree, but I overheard and went through some of the same emotions that these individuals were going through. And there were people who saw it coming. There were people who were already thinking about the next step, and there were a lot of people there who it was a shock and very, very distressing and upsetting. And I'm in the room next door, and the belief, the passion, and the importance I think the role has of business development in a business, I was kind of feeling responsible for that. Yeah, it was my fault. Now, as an older man, I now realise there's so many components there that was a reason why it failed. But absolutely, business development had a key part to play in that, and it hadn't worked. And actually, that passion and that raw feeling sits with me every single day. So what is business development? How would you define it? I absolutely do feel that part of my role is to make sure that everybody has got a job and is achieving their potential, because that front end stuff that you spoke about earlier is all sorted.
And it's really interesting because I, as you know, I spend a lot of time now advising companies, and one of the first things we talk about is the business development, because the rest of the business doesn't happen. There is no business if you don't get the business development right. If you haven't got the orders coming in, if you're not positioned correctly in the marketplace, then everything else, it doesn't matter how good everything else is, it fails effectively. So that front part of the business is absolutely critical, and I think. So one of the observations I have is I don't think a lot of the rest of the business really understand business development and why it's so important. Hence, one of the reasons for inviting you on today is to help get that message across to everybody. Yeah, so clearly a lot of today's been talking about the profession of business development, but it's really important the whole business grasps why it's important and what it brings.
Yeah. And I felt responsible for that back then, and I still feel responsible for that now. And you need some broad shoulders to be able to carry that weight, and perhaps it's a bit too much, but actually it's that passion and that belief which drives a successful business development.
But it's part of the team as well, isn't it? So everybody else works alongside that business development function to make it a success. So knowing you as I do, Tom, and we've 15 years we've known each other when I checked over the weekend. So
great years.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic years for both of us, obviously. And I know you've always liked the challenge of moving into a new industry or into something different. And I just wondered how you would approach business development when you go into a new industry or into a different environment.
Yeah, good point. It is transferable. and I've enjoyed testing that over the years. So, as I said, when I was in an operational role, that was mechanical and electrical engineering, so quite often referred to as pipes and wires, and have done business development in that environment a number of times throughout my career. Kind of come back to that. Also, where I am now, big construction projects, bricks and sticks. So pipes and wires, or bricks and sticks. I've tried other things as well. So for a while, I went and worked for a recruitment consultancy, which was kind of right on the limits of certainly my knowledge of that industry. It was a real lessons learnt, but of course, I had faith that my approach and the processes that I had learnt and I had since taught with my teams and mentored with those around me, absolutely convinced they would work there, and they did. Now, the challenge there was not only a new industry for me, and thankfully I had a boss who spotted that's exactly what I need. I need somebody to come in who's not worked in the industry before, can find the gaps that we can't find, and then propose ways to close them. My product, in effect, was the team, was the people around me. So really positioning the key team players where they needed to be, infusing them in terms of the strategy, and in many instances that strategy didn't exist, as I mentioned earlier. So creating that, but then taking that into also a new sector. So that was the rail sector for me. So operated in the rail sector. And then overseas as well. So hopefully you can see what the attraction was, certainly for myself there, in all of that was new. And it worked. It absolutely worked, to the point where that business increased its value. It was an owner-operated business, and sometime after I left, but they sold the business, and the owner did all right out of it. So that reassured me and convinced me that I'm doing it right. There's something here. And who knows, at some point in the future, maybe I will create a qualification, and there'll be badged up business development professionals out there. But at the moment, and the world's changing at a hell of a pace. So there's never a dull day. I'm consistently learning new stuff. In my 35 years, digital. We're doing it now. Digital marketing has grown over that time, and the power and influence that has within an organisation, and many other aspects of business have changed from when I first started out. So continually having to learn, continually finding gaps, seeing new gaps that are appearing in the business, and then evolving to try and close those out. And in my current, I've been in my business 2.5 years, and I would describe them as inch wide, mile deep. So very narrow approach to the market, intentionally so, but by crikey, experts in their field, as I described when I gave the introduction. So there's the value in the business. Absolutely experts at what they do. So what's the role of business development there? Well, it is, it won't stay like that. It never does. Things change, events happen. So it's just understanding what that plan B looks like, what else is happening in the world, and how that's influencing our business. And maybe that inch wide needs to be just 2 inches wide. Don't want to be everything to everybody. That's not the strategy in the business. But really just understanding that what if scenario, and I've been doing that for 2.5 years, and I can see the benefits of that approach.
So what advice would you give a budding business development professional that's just coming into the industry then?
Yeah, well, truthfully,
yeah.
I would first of all say, well done. You've picked the best career role ever. I started off immensely passionate and enthusiastic about my chosen career path, and I still feel the same way. Hopefully, that's coming across loud and clear. I would say, if you're on the fence about whether doing it or not, absolutely do it. And that is one of the kind of behavioural traits you need, really, which is should I, shouldn't I? Well, then you should, within reason, not be maverick about it. But the advice I would give is you absolutely have to go for it. And if you're going to go for it, then bloody well go for it. Look, there's a lot of blockers in the way, but there is in every job. Yeah, they're quite immediate in business development. It is almost a yes no thing. So you kind of have to get used to rejection a lot. Certainly in my industry, we tender a lot of work. It's 1 in 3, 1 in 4. You want to try and make that 1 in 2 if we can, maybe 1 in 1. Negotiate work if possible, but there's a lot of rejection there. And it's hard to not get passionate about that and feel very, very upset when things don't go to plan. And that's brilliant. Own that energy, own that emotion, and learn from it, and take it on to the next one. So be prepared for that, I would say, in business development. The other advice, so that's kind of the emotional side of things, along with focus and drive and ambition. Never lose your eyes on the prize. We've got an objective and a strategy that we're trying to deliver here, but ensure that you've got the process and procedure behind that to demonstrate not only to yourself but to those around you. And you're not on your own here. You're bringing people with you. Otherwise, it won't work. Words I should have listened to earlier in my career. But you're bringing people with you. But ensure that you've got that discipline and process, some of which I spoke about earlier, behind you to show that you are progressing in line with the strategy and the plan. Not only if you're starting out, you're going to have people above you that need demonstrating that it's working, but also for yourself. And probably the biggest thing that I've had in my career that I remind myself of every day, and I try to make sure happens every single day, is to stay uncomfortable. If, certainly in my definition of business development, if everything looks right and it's going to plan and it's all working, then I think you're probably doing it wrong. And the only person you're kidding is yourself. Yeah, because it ain't never like that. So the tools and processes that I have in place, that I use, that I've evolved through working in those numerous industries, kind of around the globe, etc., are all designed to make sure you remain uncomfortable. And it's uncomfortable being uncomfortable. That's the point. But what it does is, if you're uncomfortable, then you do something about it. Now, sorry to the young business development professional, but you'll never get there. You'll never achieve what you're looking for. But actually, that journey and that progress is what moves you forwards. Yeah. And by the time you get close to achieving it, something else has happened, or you give it away. You give it to the next part of the business or individual or whatever who's now ready for that stage, and you're on to the next one. So yeah, stay uncomfortable is probably the biggest word of advice I would give.
It kind of ties into something you and I have discussed before, which maybe we'll pick up another time, about don't believe your own bullshit.
Yeah, I was being polite.
Yeah, I know you were.
Yeah, very much so. And almost in defining the role of business development, question you asked earlier, it is kind of breaking down that approach in business, which is a drive to make yourself comfortable. It is to make sure you can see where the numbers are coming from. How are we seeing the right customers? Have we got the right profile? Have we got the right products? And that's perfect, and that's good, and that's right in business. But certainly in my industry, my chosen industry, kind of construction and property, sometimes you're a little bit of a lone voice, because you're going, yeah, but what if actually I'm hearing this is happening, and you're going to upset a few people along the way, both internally and externally, probably mostly internally. So there's a skill around doing that, and I think, as I said earlier, having that knowledge is one thing, but being wise about how you handle that within the business is another. And I was very, very bad at that at the beginning of my career. A few more grey hairs now, and you find a way of doing that. And most of the time I get it right, but not all the time. And actually, sometimes people just need to be downright told. But that's thankfully a rarity now. Okay, and I mean, those are my thoughts around what a new business development professional should be considering. Having worked with a number of BD professionals, what advice would you give?
I think the advice I'd give is to have no fear. The best ones I've seen are those that get out there and then kind of make it happen, really. So, and I don't want to sound derogatory, but a poor business development person, in my view, does one of two things. They either almost just do a desktop exercise and are just taking what the data gives them, but they're not checking it up or making sure that the data is correct. So they're kind of keeping score of what's going on rather than influencing what's going on the pitch. Or the other poor business development person is somebody who's just going out and talking to the people they know, but are not going out with a plan and with a and they're not going out with a plan or a purpose of what they want to get to. They don't have an end game. So they're going around talking to the people they know and will collect that data, but they don't know what purpose they've got for that data.
Yeah, far too comfortable.
Far too comfortable, exactly right, yeah. Well, I think that probably wraps up for today then. So thank you for coming. If you could just sum up in a few words what business development is, in a key phrase.
In a key phrase, yeah, I think it is just stretching the business a little bit outside its comfort zone, so that you can close the gaps in its profile, in its workload, in its customer base, in the numbers, etc. Always hunting that gap, but working not only with the external side of the business, but the internal side, all based around an enthusiasm, a passion, but also great process and strategy that drives that.
Excellent, thank you. Why do you think business development is so important to a company's strategy?
Okay, it is. It is very important to a company strategy. I think without business development, you've not got a complete strategy. I think in a previous section, I spoke about the role that business development has in terms of that early stuff in a business, understanding where we are currently, where we want to be, and therefore the strategy that bridges that, how you get across. And I've worked in businesses where I've created that strategy, where I've contributed to it, or I've been given it, and I've had to be a part of the team that delivers it. But then taking that strategy and turning it into something that is deliverable with real tangible actions that can demonstrate an output, a desired output, or maybe not. So business development is integral through all of that, and where it is most effective is where it's involved in that early stage, so that sense of purpose and belief. It's kind of we're all kind of a bit tribal, and we're all on a mission and that kind of hearts and minds stuff. And right, everybody's going this way. This is the way we're going. And yeah, come on, let's go for it. So certainly from my perspective, that's what I try to develop in myself and in my teams that have worked with me and those around me. And then really being a key agent of change, because invariably it means change. If you need, and you do need, business development in your business, it's generally to stay abreast of that change, understand the changes that are going around you, because they always are, and being that agent of change and that deliverer of change that's required to ensure your business is sustainable and maintained.
So, what do you think a business development strategy looks like?
I mean, you've identified it there as a separate thing, and certainly there needs to be an aligned business development approach with strategy, but it can't be a separate thing. So you can't really have a business development strategy without the overall company strategy, and you can't really have the company strategy without input from the business development strategy. So there's kind of this meeting in the middle. What structure and approach and processes in place to make that effective, and that's really where the strategy comes in terms of positioning, whether it's with the customer relationships that you're looking at. So I think you said in a previous question or a previous point, seeing your mates, the people you've always spoken to, always worked with, sometimes won't necessarily give you what you want here. So being able to challenge that, identify the gaps in terms of that process, in terms of customer relationships, which again can be quite difficult. Sometimes you've got customers who are very standoffish, or you're going through a very formal tender process.
What I found really interesting in what you've just said, and hopefully you won't find this too provocative, but you talked a lot about structure and a lot of process and procedures. But from the outside looking in, business development doesn't seem to run with many processes and procedures. Most people would say you're free spirits that don't really follow the rules of everybody else. What do you think that is? Why do you think there's a perception? My perception and your perception are obviously quite different.
Look, that's partly true as well, and I think I think business development professionals who only do the process and procedure will only get to a certain point in their career and provide a certain amount of value to the business. Now that is, in my experience, that's kind of the easy part of the job, but is almost unfairly weighted, because it's so visible and evident, and there's definite outputs in terms of reports and spreadsheets and analysis, and there you go. You can feel it and touch it. The flip side of that, in terms of those free spirits that you talk about, it's a little bit Wild West out there if you're not careful. So there are some characters out there who have got fantastic personalities, do know lots of people, find it very easy in certain situations to develop relationships. There's a lot of cold calling in there, and that's a challenge for some people, and some individuals find that very, very easy to do, which is great. Now the skill, certainly when I'm recruiting business development professionals, is finding somebody who can do both. Now, finding somebody who can do both very, very well is unique. But if you can get both elements to a really good level, then you've got a cracking business development professional there. What does that mean for the business development strategy? It is making sure that you're not focusing too heavily on one aspect over another.
So I want to bring you back to something you said a few moments ago, which was about the change and the change management. And certainly when I get involved with businesses and I'm looking at their business strategies and their business plans, it's normally I'm brought in for one of two reasons. Either they're at a position where they're looking at growth and they're looking to take the business in a new direction and become bigger and better than they currently are, or it's a business that's in a bit of crisis, maybe stagnating a bit, maybe still got the effect of COVID or maybe the credit crunch, and therefore what they're looking at is how they stabilise before they can do anything else. Do you think the strategy for business development is different in those two environments?
Yeah, certainly the tasks that you're undertaking are different, but the ethos behind it is the same, I think. All businesses have got the same components. They've all got customers, they've all got revenues, they've all got structures and operations and staff, and that is universal. So understanding what the ultimate buyer and what the customer wants is key to that, but aligning that with what we define our business to be. You told me a story once, nobody knew they wanted an iPad, until one was invented. So, that's right at the forefront of business development and spotting a gap in the opportunity. So, So it isn't just more of the same or whatever, but the process behind all of that is still going to be the same. In terms of that customer, in terms of from a business development professional, know the numbers. In terms of a BD professional, understand what the structure of the business is, what are the overall goals and objectives, what can we do, what do we want to do, as important, what can't we do. That way danger lies.
So within the podcasts at the moment, and actually this is going to kind of slot in and interrupt the flow, but within the podcast I've been talking about the 4 strands to what makes a successful strategy, and this will be very familiar to you, but the starting point is setting that ambition, so knowing where you want to get to and sort of being able to describe what the end position looks like. The second's the identity, and actually that discussion we had earlier about the business we were working for, it became really important to understand the identity of the business to be able to go out and sell that. And then we've got the competitive advantage. And I just thought we'd maybe home in on that because you spoke about competitive advantage a bit earlier. What part do you think competitive advantage has to play within business development? And then likewise, what part do you think business development has to play within competitive advantage?
Yeah, okay, competitive advantage. So in my career, I've only ever worked for businesses that operate in a competitive environment. You have to beat the competition, and that's true in many aspects of life and sport and the like. I've had some coaching in the past from sports professionals who've come into business to talk about how to compete, and a really good understanding of what you've got as a business, maybe even as an individual. That is competitive, that is going to win that race, whatever that is, however you define it, is essential. The knowledge of that is essential. The belief in that is essential, such that you can go out there and portray that, demonstrate the value in your organisation that is appreciated by the customer or whoever it is you're trying to engage with. So time spent on understanding what that competitive advantage looks like is absolutely essential and needs to form part of that very early, not just business development strategy, but overall business strategy. Otherwise, you're going to go and turn up in a situation where you're not able to demonstrate that, and you're not going to prick up the ears of people. They're not going to go, I'm very interested in this. Now, that can't stand on its own. You need to understand the process you're in and the people that you're engaging with, or the process that you're engaging with, so you know what that defines as of value. Yeah. Now, I hear a lot about USPs, unique selling points, and increasingly I find myself in somewhat commoditized situations, procurement processes, where there is almost a drive to push out that or eliminate that uniqueness. And there's not that many organizations now that are out there that are uniquely unique. So what are you left with? Well, there's going to be a whole myriad of things out there that you do differently to the competition, and the ability to align those different things you do with what is going to be perceived as value is absolutely critical. So I've got it. I've had it in a previous business where I ask a very simple question. How are we going to win this project or this proposal? How are we going to win that? And they go, price. Yeah. So price is the main differentiator. I'm like, okay. It's a key decision. Other than price, how are we going to compete? And
they always then say relationship, don't they?
Absolutely, they absolutely do. Us, and like, yes, absolutely, that's absolutely right. What else? And therefore, then the conversation quite often, not now in my current organisation, but in previous organisations, kind of fizzles out a little bit. So, and there's a whole host of things that you can be doing if you sit down and think about it. If you get the right group of individuals around the table, and if you fully know the process you're engaging with and the end result you're trying to achieve with the individuals or the process or the company or whatever, and it's hard. It's blooming hard. But I'd rather be doing the work up here in the front in the strategizing stage to make it easy over here, rather than not knowing over here and then playing catch up towards the end of the process. And if you're playing catch up, your conversion ratio is going to suffer greatly. Yeah. I mean, is that kind of what you see within you have seen within your business, and kind of what you're talking about now with?
Yeah, definitely, as you'd expect, an overlap there. I mean, for me, I find it amazing how many businesses I go to and I ask the question, what is your competitive advantage? And they don't actually know. That they will either they'll explain what they're doing, but actually it's pretty much the same as their competition. Or they've got something really good in the business, but they haven't identified it as competitive advantage because it's just what they do.
Yeah.
And they
Love
haven't.
that. Love
Yeah,
that.
and they don't know that what they're doing is special or different or is what clients are looking for. So it's a combination of those things that I find that either is not really competitive advantage, but it might be if you tweaked it. Businesses can assemble things in a different way.
Yeah.
That in that respect they are actually giving a competitive advantage. But quite often they've got something really good in the business
Always.
that's developed it for whatever reason. But they don't see it as anything special, and as a result of that,
love that,
you know.
and that's very easy to
Yeah.
turn around. I mean, those kind of features, I would call them. So I kind of use a matrix, FAB, not Thunderbirds, but maybe a little bit. Feature, advantage, benefit, and I've generally worked, I think, as I said previously, kind of engineering or technical type organizations who are very heavily plugged into features, but those features do give you a competitive advantage, but ultimately what the client organization or the end user or whatever that is will want to see is the benefits. Yeah, and just framing it around feature, advantage, benefit is very, very useful in terms of finding out what that competitive advantage is. You can talk about the language of benefits, but if you can demonstrate the path back to your features, that the client will see that value, and you've got a really useful conversation or dialogue or expansion of a process going on there. Yeah. I mean, you'll see it in advertising. You know, car makers don't ever say we make a car. They got people going on holiday and surfing and stuff. You know, it's about lifestyle, and this car, you know, that's the features. It's got 4 wheels and a steering wheel or whatever. You know, advantage, and the benefit is you're going to have a fantastic lifestyle and amazing holidays.
But a lot of businesses fail with that, don't they? I mean, from what I see with businesses, the features bit is always, I suppose it's easy because they're talking about themselves. They're talking about what they do, and most businesses love talking, as we all do, love talking about themselves. Whereas the benefits bit is actually looking at life through the eyes of the client, and what's important to the client, and that's actually much harder to do. So I think that's I agree. I think there's
so challenging. Don't get comfortable. You said it. Believe your own bullshit.
Yeah.
You can convince yourself those features are valuable, and it's like, really, you know, in what way? And it's challenging yourself and having those difficult conversations within the team, and it's like, and what else, and what else, and what else, so and it gets difficult.
So mentioned a bit earlier about challenges. So one of the key strands that I'll talk about on the podcast is what are the key challenges to the strategy. So in this context, what are the key challenges do you face as a business development professional?
What are the key challenges we face in business development? Loads. I guess in terms of strategy, once the strategy is produced, and I think, as I've said in a previous section, that's when the hard work starts. Now, once the strategy is produced, it's immediately out of date. It immediately changes. So And that's okay. That's absolutely fine. You don't go back and keep rewriting it. You need to get on with it and implement something. But do that with the knowledge that it will adapt, it will need to change. A good plan is an adaptable plan. And it's the testing of the strategy and the implementation that determines what you do next. So it's understanding that will need to be amended. You may need to go back round the loop, but probably you just need to tinker with it a little bit for it to remain relevant and effective. Now, to do that, there's a lot of hearts and minds and ownership in amongst that process. So you kind of, as a business development professional, you need to be very adept in mentoring and guiding your colleagues through that process. And who's to say you're right? So it works the other way as well. I absolutely think we should be going in this direction now, or as part of the strategy, and it's like, no
way,
not the case, or no way, or you have been a little bit reckless or maverick or whatever, and that happens to the best of us. Not me, of course, but
no, of course not.
So there's a lot of coming together, like with any aspect of business, really, and any strategy, not just business development. Just getting that alignment and good leadership forms an essential part of doing that, aligning everybody and getting everybody pointing in the right direction. So, I used to joke, businesses are fond of 3-year plans. Well, by year 2, it's completely changed, and that's because of events either within the organisation or global, external. And you've only got to look at the world at the moment, but it's, as I said earlier, it's always like that. There's always something. And then internally. It's a bit like the UK government, really. You think how many prime ministers we've had and how many ministers we've had. There's always internal change going on, which changes priorities and goals and objectives. So it's being able to accommodate that and understand that, and can't believe I'm saying this, but not get grumpy about that and throw your toys out the pram. That's the job. Yeah. That's the job. So. The challenge with strategy is that's the beginning of the process. Understand that's the case, and be ready to modify that, change that, and adapt to that once it gets tested out there in the real world.
Well, you and I had a set of circumstances where the business was seemed to be changing annually, and we were having to throw away the strategy and start again. And I remember you saying at year 3, we've got this all wrong. We should have a strategy that is forecasting these changes that have been happening and assume they're going to happen in the future, and actually build that into the strategy. And I think that comes back to what you've just been saying about how things are constantly changing around us, internally or externally. And your strategy has to be able to cope with that, and has to be able to kind of ride the waves, really, whichever direction that's going to take you.
And look, that's the job, and that's the world we live in.
Yeah.
I guess the other challenge is that cohesive, aligned team. That is a challenge in all aspects of business, getting everybody pulling in the same direction. And I quite often find myself in organisations where business development is a new function or a new role. Or certainly the way I do it might be new or a bit foreign to the organisation. So getting it's all very well being the captain of the ship of business development, but if you haven't got the crew with you, you're not going anywhere. You're just going to go around in circles, if anywhere at all. So that challenge of being the focal point for business development, but you can't do it on your own. You absolutely can't. You can be the conductor, you can even play some of the instruments, but you need the full orchestra there.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Mike, that's my example of a business development strategy, the critical nature of it, which was scary, but I absolutely loved it, and it kind of was make or break, and it was good. But I'm just wondering, if you've got any other examples of business development strategy and implementation of that may or may not have involved me, but are worth sharing. Perhaps.
Okay. I suppose something I come across quite often, and I like to repeat what works, so I know this is repeatable, is when I'm working with a business that's wanting to move into a new market. So that new market might be new geography. They haven't worked in Scotland before, so they want to set up and operate in Scotland. Or it might be a new market sector, so they might want to be working in the industrial sector, or they might want to work in the healthcare sector, that kind of thing. And therefore, how do you actually break into that new market when you've not been in that market before? So I always find that good fun. And I suppose, and you and I have worked together on this. In fact, a lot of what I've learnt on this has come from you. But it's taking what you already do and looking at how you can best adapt that to the new sector. So it may be looking at your competitive advantage. How is that going to work within the sector that you're moving into? Or it might be looking at the client base. Are there common clients that you could be talking to? Or could you be talking, the clients might be different, but there may be characteristics of the clients that are similar, and by doing a certain thing. So in other words, you don't need to reinvent the wheel when you're moving into a new sector. You take what you've got, and you adapt it to the new sector rather than starting from scratch. And I think a lot of people think that you've got to start from square one, but actually you're probably 80% there if you've already got a successful business. It's the 20% that you've got to modify and change to adapt to the new market. So for me, that's an example of a repeatable business development strategy.
Yeah, very much so. Either through necessity, as I mentioned earlier, or just general growth of the businesses. Most organisations I've worked for have been on a growth path, and it's really, really hard to take something brand new. We decide we're now going to make this widget and put that into a brand new market. It's not impossible. Organisations do it all the time, but it's challenging and more involved. If you can adapt or change what you're currently doing slightly to open up a whole new avenue of opportunity, that's got to be your first port of call. So that's worthy of exploring, and I've got elements of that now in my current business. Business development forms a key part of that. So what sectors, what markets, how do we do that, where do we go, where's that direction, and that's where business development comes in and informs that strategy.
Okay, just to finish up then, is there any actionable tips that you could recommend to our listeners and viewers on how to improve their business development strategies?
Well, I think first of all, do you have a strategy that's looking at business development? There'll be strategies either published or even thought of within an organisation, but kind of the how do we implement it? What does the front end of our business look like, and what is the plan around that? Does that business development strategy exist in your business? And then it's kind of the how. How are we gonna make that happen? So that would be my homework.
I was going to say that's just given us the homework for this episode. That's brilliant. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you for joining us, Tom. It's been great. Hopefully, you'll come back and join us again.
I've got plenty more.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so, by means of follow up, if you want to join the conversation with me and Tom, then message me directly on LinkedIn, or you can email me, or if you're watching on YouTube, you can leave comments below. And just as a reminder of where you can find us moving forward, Leaders and Strategy YouTube channel. You can listen to us on Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and on Podchaser. We're finally getting our podcasts up and running on our website, and you can find links to the current episode, which we publish every fortnight, on my LinkedIn page. So thanks very much for joining us. Hope you've enjoyed it. Come back for the next episode when we'll be looking at the last of our key strands, which is what are the key challenges to a strategy. I'll see you then. Thank you.